The president of Colombia accused the U.S. of war crimes last night. That accusation followed the latest U.S. military strike on suspected drug boats. In an Univision interview, Colombian President Gustavo Petro said, quote, "So Trump is wrong for surrounding himself with advisors, some of them Colombian Nazis." For more on this, I want to bring in CBS News correspondent Lilia Luciano. Lilia, you've been covering the story. How did we get here?
Been covering the story for many, many years, especially the story about the war on drugs. We got here a very long time ago, but let's keep it short and current. This war of words has continued to escalate. You have to consider that we're talking about two administrations that are on two pretty far ends of the spectrum. Petro is Colombia's most leftist president in a very long time. He has been very critical of Trump in the past and in the present. How we got here is most pressingly because of the strikes of boats in the Caribbean. Petro, like many experts say, this is not about drugs. This is about regime change in Venezuela. And although he has criticized Maduro in the past, Petro has, he still refuses to acknowledge that Maduro stole last year's election, which we covered. So as the war on words has escalated, Trump accusing Maduro of not doing enough, at the least, of not doing enough to stop coca and cocaine production. Colombia is the largest cocaine producer in the world. And you have to keep in mind that historically, the U.S. has been its strongest partner, has funded those efforts, that it is a very important war that historically the U.S. has been involved in. But now you're having record levels of cocaine being produced and coming out of Colombia. So the U.S. is saying you're not doing enough. Petro is saying we are doing enough. And now the biggest threat is that if this war of words continues, Trump has threatened to impose not just tariffs, but remove aid. Much of that aid goes to fight the war on drugs, goes to counter narcotic efforts in Colombia. The tariffs is also a big concern for Colombians, given that the U.S. is Colombia's biggest trading partner. So last night, Petro met with the U.S. ambassador, and they said this is the first approach to remedy the current impasse in bilateral relations. So there is a great deal of hope that those words will come down in terms of temperature and tone in the coming days.
Okay, Lilia Luciano, thank you so much. Joining us now is New York Times reporter Genevieve Glatsky. She's based in Bogata, the capital of Colombia. Thank you so much for being here, Genevieve. How's the media coverage there surrounding these military strikes and overall tension?
Thank you so much for having me. So in Venezuela, the narrative is very much that they're under threat, that from the official government narrative is that they're under threat. This is infringing on Venezuela's sovereignty. And in Colombia, Petro, as we've said, is the country's first leftist president. He's a very divisive figure, and opinions are really mixed on these actions that he's taken, this adversarial stance he's taken towards the U.S. He has many conservative critics who have expressed support for President Trump and say they agree with his stance that Petro has, his policies have led to an increase in cocaine production and in drug trafficking. He has some policies that many Colombians disagree with, of negotiating with armed groups, involving ex-combatants in giving them formal roles in the peace process, reducing eradication of coca crops, which is the plant that's the base ingredient for cocaine. So they very much are criticizing Petro and supporting Trump. On the other hand, he has many leftist supporters who are proud or supporting him for standing up to the U.S., who they see as infringing on Colombia's sovereignty. And they say it falls on the U.S. to address the demand for cocaine because the U.S. is one of the main consumers of cocaine, and that it really is impossible to reduce supply if demand is still rising.
What type of response from the government is expected?
It's really unclear. Petro has shown to be one of the few leaders in the region willing to take a more combative stance towards President Trump. Almost all the other leaders are very cautious. They seem very wary of offending the Trump administration. And Petro does not. We've seen that in January when they had a spat over deportation flights in which Trump threatened to impose extremely high tariffs on Colombia. That was resolved, but it was in response to Petro threatening to turn away deportation flights. Just last month, Petro criticized Trump at the UN and called on U.S. soldiers to disobey President Trump at a pro-Palestinian rally in New York outside of the UN, and the U.S. revoked his visa to the U.S. in response. So it's unclear what he'll do next, but in past actions, he's shown to be quite adversarial.
Okay, Genevieve Glatsky, thank you.